Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Northern Spotlights with me, Terry McStay. It's great to see you again. As you can see, we're at the Catalyst again for this episode because I have three guests, not just the one. And also it's kind of appropriate because the Catalyst is very much at the heart of the life sciences and science campus here in Newcastle. And the theme today is life sciences and life sciences businesses and the challenges and the adventure of starting a business in that world. So I'm delighted to welcome three guests today. So first we have Nichola.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Dr. Nichola Conlon and I am the founder and the CEO of Nuchido. My background is a scientist and we are a company trying to focus on translating longevity science into products that people can benefit from now.
And Victoria.
Hi, I'm Victoria Burnip. I'm one of the co-founders of Cognitive HealthTech, and we've created a novel way to measure brain health passively using 40 digital and clinical biomarkers.
And Sola.
Hi, glad to be here. My name is Sola Idowu. We help other companies develop better skincare products, hair care products. We've been based at the Newcastle Helix for the last 14 years.
So, I said this is about life sciences, but that's quite it's a very broad area, isn't it? But I guess all three of you, what you do is you help people to be better in some way. Is that a really rubbish way of describing it? But I guess that's what it's about.
Yeah.
So we're going to we're going to have a bit of a discussion about your experiences. But first, we just want to hear from each of you a little bit about your story and kind of the journey that you've been on. So can we start with you, Nichola?
Yeah, of course.
So you essentially help people to look younger than they really are, or see you looking younger than they really are. Is that right?
Not look younger. It is looking younger, but that's not the sole focus. So whenever I tell people what I do and I say I work in aging research, usually the first thing they say is, "Oh, you are in skincare and wrinkles and that kind of thing." But actually, when we talk about longevity and longevity science, which is what I specialize in, so I specialize in the science of what it is that goes wrong in our cells, in our bodies as we grow older. And it's much more focused on something called healthspan. So we have these really long lifespans. So for a woman in the UK, our lifespan is 83 years, but our health span, which is the proportion of that lifespan that will live in good health, is actually much shorter. It's around 63 years. Really? So we've got this huge gap.
It's 20 years.
Yeah, a huge proportion of life. And I guess if anyone's got elderly relatives or parents, you'll know what being out of your health span feels like or looks like. So a lot of the science and the research in this space is looking at how we can close that gap and improve people's health spans. So I always say when we think of aging, ultimately everything all starts on the inside, even though most people notice it on the outside, but it's about trying to not only fix the surface, but how we feel, how we're thinking, our energy. It's not just about the looks.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's something in our cells that happens that you try to stop happening.
Yeah,
your products do.
Exactly that. So a lot of the research in this field has really focused on looking at not how we deal with the consequences of aging, which is what science has focused on for a long time, like dealing with the aftermath, so to speak. But it's much more focused on looking at why are we aging in the first place? So what is it that's going on in our cells that is essentially going wrong and causing everything that we are seeing, feeling and experiencing on the outside as part of the aging process. And over the last decade, there's been huge breakthroughs that mean we really do now understand key things that are going wrong. And what this field is focused on is trying to look at the science of how we can improve those things. So as a company, what we do is try to take all the crazy science that's going on in that space and actually turn it into products, education, things that the average person can benefit from. Because a big passion for me as a scientist has always been, science is amazing and it's fascinating, but there's so much science that gets locked away in labs and doesn't actually get out into the public, or it takes a very long time to get there. So that's really has always been my passion of how can we take cool science and get it out into the hands of people that can benefit from it as quickly as possible, really.
And presumably that's the research when you were at science, well, you still are, but when you were doing that kind of research and stuff, is that the field you're working in?
Yeah, I mean, originally it wasn't longevity that I worked in. I worked in cancer therapy, so I worked in drug development. And basically one day, over 10 years ago now, my boss sort of came to me at the time and said, oh, we're going to put you on a new project. You're going to be looking at drugs to slow the aging process. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, there's no such thing as a drug for aging. But he was like, no, something's brewing. You know, the science is changing. There's a lot of evidence coming out now that actually our age is our biggest risk factor for pretty much every major disease that drugs companies are trying to, you know, target. So the idea was, if you could slow down the rate of cellular aging even just a little bit, then maybe you could have a positive impact on reducing the onset of all those age-related diseases and ultimately improving health span. So I was sort of given this amazing opportunity. I didn't feel like it was an amazing opportunity at the time, mind. I thought I was being put on some side project that had no hope, you know. But it turned out that actually the science was so credible that it was an area of science that was going to explode, and it has done, and really change our perception on aging. You know, no longer thinking that it's this one-way street of decline, but actually showing us that a lot of the things that are changing in our cells are actually reversible. And there's a lot of things you can do to reverse that, or at least slow it down. So that's how I kind of got into it. And I worked within the drug development space, looking at molecules to do this. But one thing that really frustrated me in that world was the time it takes to get this early research actually into the hands of people. You know, this was going to take 15, 20 years, still is. People are still trying to do this. It's still not something that is becoming available.
Which is ironic, given that you're trying to close that 20-year gap, and it's taken
so long. And
this is
you know, drug development is like that. It takes a long time because of the process that everything has to go through. But looking at a drug to slow the aging process is even more complicated, because aging is not classified as a disease. Therefore, you can't do a clinical trial for aging, and obviously a drug needs a clinical trial. So how do you work that one out? Also, you know, how do you measure this? How do you prove that you are slowing aging? So loads of different things that were all added extra caveats to that. But at the same time, a lot of the work I was doing when we were looking at molecules that were having a positive impact on cellular aging, we were seeing a lot of molecules that weren't typical drug molecules, things that, you know, were quite common already, things that were in foods, in plants and supplements. So I'd always thought, well, you know, we know these things are safe. We know people have used them for years, but people don't realize the benefits that these molecules can have for cellular aging. So that was where my sort of idea came, of like, how can we get this out to people? And I kept saying to my boss at the time, like, we should be putting these in skincare, you know, typical thinking of the skin first when it comes to aging, or we should be putting them in supplements. You know, these things do not need to be regulated as drugs. These things, we can do all the clinical trials, we can do the safety, we can do everything much quicker and get them out to people. But, you know, he kept saying to me, Nichola, we are a serious drug development company. We are not a skincare company. If you want to go and develop face creams, go and start your own company. So that's what I did. I was like, how hard could it be? Yeah, so off I went, and this was in 2017. So Nuchido was founded in 2017, and the idea was do all the same kind of science and research that we would do to look for drug molecules, but instead of looking for drug molecules, let's look for molecules that we can put in supplements, in topicals, in things that we can get out to consumers. Yeah, and that's how it all began.
And what's the journey been like?
I mean, the
in
journey...
in 2 sentences.
In 2 sentences, crazy, but very fulfilling. Like I think people look at my life and go, oh my goodness, like what a crazy life. And like what, you know, a lot of people when I left my job in drug development thought I'd completely lost the plot. You know, I'd done 10 years at uni to get a good job in working in a pharma company, and it was very credible. And then
So being an entrepreneur wasn't
walked away
on
from
radar.
it to start a supplement company, which is in most people's eyes regarded as a load of rubbish and snake oil and nothing works. But I'd seen a lot that if you can formulate and develop things in the right way and give them the science they deserve, that these molecules have just as much efficacy and power as a lot of the drugs. Like, your body doesn't know the difference between a drug, a supplement, a nutrient, water, sugar. It all has a powerful physiological effect. So yeah.
So what's your kind of product range look like?
So we still only have one main product, which we've really focused on, because we actually had some really good data, which was led to the development of a supplement that was basically like a game changer in the category that it's in. It worked in a very different way, and we did a lot of clinical research, clinical trials on it. So we've really focused on that one. And we do a lot of research. So we do a lot of research into molecules looking for different supplements, skin products, which in the future we may develop, or we may out-license that to other bigger companies. And also, we still do drug development because naturally now when we're looking for non-drug molecules, we also come across drug molecules that work really well. Okay. So I still actually throughout the whole time have had either a visiting scholar or a co-supervisor or whatever with the universities, with Newcastle University, with Northumbria University. I have PhD students, and I have collaborations with the universities in doing the research on these early phase.
Because you've got quite a small team, so I guess you rely on those collaborations to do a lot of that work.
Yeah, so a lot of the science is collaborative. We've had periods where we've done more science and focused more on the science, where we've had our own team. Then we have periods in the company where we focus more on the the sales and marketing of the product that we have. But ultimately my idea was always, how can we get products out there to return a revenue to then reinvest that money back in the science? And that's what we've always done. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, don't worry, viewers, we will hear more about each of the products, because I'm sure many of us want to look younger. Be younger. Yes. And also the other things that we're going to hear about next. So we will give each of you a chance to, do a little plug, because that's only fair. Thanks, Nichola.
Oh, you're welcome.
So Victoria, your kind of thing is a different type of wellness and well-being, I guess, is that?
I would say, like, following on from Nichola, I've come from a very different background. So my passion is about cognitive health, and where that came from was, like I say, from a very completely different background to the scientists that are, sat next to me. Mine's come from a lot of lived experience. And so my first interaction with a challenge with someone's cognitive health was at 13-year-old, when my dad was not very well, should we say, with a mental health crisis, which then took 10 years to diagnose as bipolar. And that was my first interaction as a daughter of someone. But my mother also worked as a clinical lead in mental health. So I'd always been surrounded by her work with challenging behaviour and adults with learning disabilities and crisis teams. And it was just always really fascinating to me. But I actually ended up going to train in marketing, and somehow found myself at the intersection of then leading charities with healthy ageing and social care. So my first kind of interim chief position was at an ageing charity. And then I've spent the majority of my time in the charitable sector, meeting people with dementia, creating services for adults who have got frailty or been discharged from hospital, and experiencing it firsthand, and I suppose working with different carers. So it's been a bit of a different trajectory for me. Yeah. My grandmother had dementia, and then my son and myself have both got ADHD, neurodevelopmental conditions, autism and dyspraxia and things. So I suppose I've come at it from a very different perspective, but that's what first interested me in what we're doing.
As you say, lived experience as opposed to things that you've studied or...
Well, like lived experience, but still a lot of professional experience just from a different perspective, you know, developing services that were commissioned by health, but working with people to develop those services has been where I've come from. And I suppose what got me into, what led to where we are now was, I'd spent a lot of time in the charity sector and then decided, a bit like yourself, I'm going to go and do something that I'm really interested in, which was mental health and cognitive health. And I decided to do this at the height of COVID, which was a bit crazy. But I decided, no, now's the time. And we had an idea where we wanted to, you know, I was very passionate about the arts as well, play different musical instruments. I've always known that art has helped my own neurodevelopmental challenges. And we actually came up with a service with about 20 different artists. And the idea was all around training those artists in various different cognitive stimulation, validated health therapies. And we actually developed that service. This is where the idea kind of spin out of. We developed that service in Tees Valley. We had funding from COVID Fast Response Fund and designed it with Tees Esconway Valley at the time. And we scaled that quite exponentially, but then came across a lot of challenges that then kind of put a halt to some, you know, 3 years of amazing work. But part of that journey for me was, and one of the challenges we kept facing was, you know, how do you articulate something that's invisible? Because you've got a lot of charities that do amazing work, and there'll be a case study of, you know, the age-old case study of an adult with dementia that's played a musical instrument, that's improved their memory, and the research might be on that one particular, you know, aspect. But actually, how do these kind of different programs that are available, whether that be art or whether that be just day-to-day lifestyle interventions, you know, like the World Health Organization stated 45% of dementias could be preventable through lifestyle and you know, interventions and behaviour modification at younger ages. So I think for me it was how do we evidence that in a way that helps people make those changes? Because if you can't see it, it's not easy to articulate. And so I kept getting that question about the commission and, well, how is this different to every other arts programme? And this is where this basically came out of. Right. And I said, right, let's get some research on this to look at how we can objectively measure cognitive function. So cognitive function being the 6 areas of your brain, like 6 areas that are related to focus and attention, memory, executive function, how you like use your fine motor skills or communicate. And I wanted to try and demonstrate that in an objective way, but the only way to do that was very expensive MRI scans or CT scans, which the research wouldn't enable us to facilitate. And so I basically, you know, being quite naive and not a scientist, quite often think out of the box, well, can we just create a methodology to do this? You know, like it's something really simple. And the professor that is my co-founder at Cognitive HealthTech, Professor Christine Mogner, was a doctor at Sheffield at this time, and had done some work in analysis of behavioural conditions with people with dementia. And me and him basically, you know, I worked with Sheffield intensively to come up with this way of measuring cognitive health objectively across the brain. And basically, we then took that and trained AI in 40 different biomarkers that we realised were all clinically aligned. So it's, I suppose it's observations that people like, you know, consultant psychiatrists or mental health nurses or occupational therapists, you know, significantly trained in observing natural behaviour and subtle changes that we might not necessarily see. They do that so easily because they've been trained in it, and that's their job, but it's not something that they naturally report on. And so we kind of looked at all those measures, and that's the type of stuff that's been trained. It's quite based on linguistics. Right.
Because even though I'm surrounded by scientists, the scientists don't always have the answer, do they? Sometimes they look for the complicated, and you found not a simpler answer, but a different way of getting to that.
I think it goes back to that point of collaboration. Like, the scientists are amazing, and I would never knock that. You know, I get to work with so many incredible people. We're doing quite a lot of work with a professor at Teesside who's, you know, a neuroscientist from Cambridge originally, and then leads the biopharma and health unit at Teesside. I've had some other amazing scientists who have literally led published papers on neurology all around the world, you know, giving advice on how we develop this. But so the science is a massive aspect, and you've got to listen to the experts. But I take the principle of collaboration. All the ideas are valid at the table, and let's bring different perspectives and different minds to shape how that should look.
So your kind of product service, what is it? What would it help someone to do
So
better or quicker or differently?
essentially, it's a way of like measuring subtle changes that you might not see in your day-to-day world, in your natural environment, of how essentially it's how you would measure day-to-day changes in cognitive function that you might not see, and it'll provide like that longitudinally over a long period of time. If you think of it like Google Health, instead of measuring your step count or your heart rate, you're essentially measuring 40 indicators across all 6 cognitive domains in your brain. And I suppose how that helps someone is it's really difficult. So if you start to notice changes with memory, or, you know, that's the obvious one, or I'm losing focus, but how do you articulate that to someone to then get the support or the diagnosis or the treatment that's around? And so this would provide people with a dashboard that gives them insights into all of those indicators that they can share with the experts, who can then use that to try and help them navigate where the challenges are, what conditions it could be. So in some respects, we're positioning this that it could, you know, be potential to help with early detection of dementia in primary care. That's, you know, we've built a lot of relationships with the NHS, and we're about to start, and we're applying for, you know, funding to do some clinical research trials to try and demonstrate, you know, could this be helpful in detecting dementia earlier, or even giving some additional information to clinicians that they can then use to speed up and accelerate that process? Or can people therefore use it even in their day-to-day life to put more support in place if they notice deterioration of their loved one, and, you know, throughout the app over a period of time, can they then escalate that to get support quicker or plan support in the future? So that's the type of things we're looking at. Ideally, it was trained, originally the methodology came out of working with people with various different conditions. So whether that be things like severe mental health, or neurodegenerative diseases like dementia, or whether that's things like our neurodevelopmental like ADHD, because there's a lot of research shows people with ADHD are 3 times more likely or more at risk of getting dementia, especially if it's hereditary as well. So it's about, I suppose, trying to train it to support people with varying conditions and look at the person, not just the condition eventually, but now, just right now, we're focusing on dementia.
Because I guess with a lot of these things, you look back and think, oh yeah, I should have noticed then that there was something different. And if you can do that, I guess you can intervene a lot sooner.
Yeah, well, this is like in real time. So because it uses video and audio from your phone, it'll basically, if you give it permission, passively analyze all of that data. You're just going about your day-to-day life. It'll notice nuanced differences between your conversation with your loved one over that period of time. So it flags things that you wouldn't have thought. And I think that's the hardest bit. I always remember taking my grandma with my mum for, you know, we were convinced she was having memory challenges, but to her, one of the biggest hurdles is she just didn't want to hear it. You know, no one wants to hear there's a challenge there, do they? You know, my mind sound was what she said, and you're not taking me, basically. But then how do you, as a loved one, you know, without that causes tension, you know, in a family unit, and how do you then explain to a doctor in a 10-minute appointment, well, these are, you know, well, what examples have you got? And especially having my own short-term working memory problem, I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning most days, never mind remember an entire week of what's happened to me or what the trends or patterns are. And so having that kind of tangible example that you can then say, well, actually, here's some data that shows this happened this day because of this, and here's an example, I think would really help, you know, people to stop feeling like they're batting their head off a wall, really.
Wow. So what stage is it at? Is it launched? Or?
No, so we're at the point of finishing the development, the MVP. We've got the biomarkers trained, and we're now at the point of like about to go and test this year, with the hope that we can do some clinical trials early 27 onwards.
Fantastic. It must be an exciting journey that you probably didn't expect?
No, like, I mean, you don't expect to go and train in marketing and then, you know, end up in chief exec in charity to then end up here. It's been a bit of a journey, really, but an exciting one with lots of interesting people.
Yeah, and it would be dull if you just did the same thing for your whole life, wouldn't it? I mean, who wants that?
Yeah.
It's an adventure.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about human connection and, you know, what makes people tick. But actually what fundamentally helps people with their independence and quality of life is understanding themselves. And, you know, a lot of people invest a lot of time in personal development. They invest a lot of time in health and well-being. You know, there's a whole market of people that are using wearables right now to detect physical health. And it's really important that we get this right, where we can detect things with brain health that can support long-term, you know, even drugs and pharma trials. There's drugs that are being created right now for people who've been detected early with dementia, but the problem is there's nothing to detect people early with dementia to then offer the treatment. So, you know, it's really important that we do this in a way that people can use it every day and it becomes, you know, something that's easy to use, accessible, but actually makes quite a transformative difference to their day-to-day lives.
Brilliant. Thanks, Victoria. So Sola, we've known each other quite some time, haven't we?
It's been a long time. Yeah,
guises. And you're actually based in
the Biosphere
site.
The Biosphere, which is next to the Catalyst building. Yeah.
So tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah.
What
So
your products do.
85% of the product that is launched every year is considered to be a failure.
Really?
Yes, in personal care and beauty. So that is 120 billion plastics on landfill every single year. Only 6% of them is recyclable.
Right.
4 billion taken off from the economy because the product does not fit what is meant to be useful.
Okay.
So if any one of us, your viewers, look at their bathroom today, they find so many things. I tried that. This one doesn't work. This one. Think about what happened to all those products. So we are driven by influencer economy, whereby people buy things because somebody said, that works or that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem really lies, in terms of the economy, in terms of the environment, in terms of people's health. How do we minimize this waste? How do we take care of the planet? And that is what we try to do, say, how do we know that this particular formulation or ingredients actually do what you're going to put on the label that it said they actually do?
Right.
So that's what we've been doing for 14 years with a number of our clients, some of them mostly in the US, but some in the UK as well, to go deep dive into the biology of the formulation, the compound. Does it actually produce the benefit, and where is the evidence that say this is going to work? So that is the focus of our work.
Because most people would assume that is done anyway.
So if you think about it, Terry, so you spend all your life telling people, just buy that, everything is awesome. And all of a sudden, oh, by the way, you know what? Maybe, you should consider this if you're this or that, and that's where the problem really lies. So it's easy to press the manufacturing button and sales button and get your 85% margin, by selling the same thing to people, whether it works for them or not. Once it leaves the factory, who really cares? Right. So there are so many dimensions to the problems, but we focus on two aspects. So we think the biggest problem, with products that doesn't work is because of the different skin phenotypes. And I'm talking about phenotypes in terms of 4 basic categories: European, African, Asian, and India.
Okay.
Those collaboratively, those skin types, have a distinctive way they respond to everyday ingredients and formulation. And we've published a lot of papers on this. We've had collaboration with National Institute in Singapore. We've tested a lot of materials on this to explain, why we see that there are differences. And consumers are kind of aware of it, that there is something going on, but they can't really put, their finger on it.
Yeah.
So one thing we noticed recently is that we're getting nearly 1 million impressions on our website, to read papers, blogs, because we published a lot. And that is where we communicate. And Google likes sending people to us and they tell us about how wonderful our website is because we're not doing anything on it. So we kind of deep dive into say, okay, what is it that people are actually concerned about, or what did they really want to understand? One of the keywords that we found was melanin. So, because we've written a lot about melanin and hyperpigmentation, skin of color, European skin, but they don't really fully understand what the issues are. So I thought, okay, these people are not scientists. And some of these papers, been cited as top 5% in Alphametrics, globally well-known, piece of research featured in so many documentaries. But one thing we realize is that people still do not understand the basics. Mm-hmm. So I guess my next evolution of my personal journey and company journey is to find a way of communicating and disseminating and actually explaining what might be going on to the consumer. So that's one of the reasons why I'm writing this book, because we wanted to make it clear, what is the issue that they're trying to address. Let's put a definition to the problems, that they try to, to find solutions to.
So I guess in a way you're working to sort of educate the manufacturers of these products to make sure they actually work, but also the end users as well to understand the differences and the issues?
Well, that's why I started 14 years ago. That's why we've known each other for a lot. We started, so my background is theoretical physics, applied mathematics. I worked in computer science for many, many years. Then, came to Newcastle 30 years ago for my doctorate degree. And I worked in NASA in the days where it takes 6 months to run a calculation. You press that button, come 6 months later to get your answer. So I've been exposed to large data, computation, high, heavy, intense compute. That's what I've always done all my life. So when I started Hexis Lab 14 years ago, the focus was to use AI model to beauty and personal care products, because I thought, what industry has better opportunity to use large data, models and computation to understand better formulation, better, responsive and compound to different biology of the skin than beauty and personal care. Mm. But everybody thought we were crazy. This was like space science, it's like rocket science. What are you talking about? This thing is not going to work, and there were a lot of pushback. We did not really make any progress with that. Then we started testing ingredients until, 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago, that the large language model started coming out a little bit. And people say, oh, that thing that we were talking about 6 years ago, are you still doing it? Yes, we're still doing it. So we've got, federated databases of about 300,000 natural ingredients that you can prototype into different formulations. You can use to analyze different environment conditions. You can model your solution, as almost like precisely as possible before you actually go into manufacturing. So by the time you get into the lab and test, and we do a lot of lab testing as well, you know exactly what the likely outcome is going to be.
Right.
And then most likely that product is not going to go to another landfill because it's been designed for the specific purpose for which, you want to achieve in terms of the formulation. So that is a bit of the journey, and that is how, the different things, that I've, been involved in the past come together to produce solution. And also, when you, getting older, looking at the second half of life, you move away from advocacy to actually, you have to actually do something, otherwise, nobody, it doesn't, you can talk, you can write papers, you can develop research, you've got to do something, and that is one of the journey that we embarked on to say, okay, well, there are gaps in the market that nobody, wants to address. So one of the issues is texture there, and that was a personal thing because of my daughter. She's a competitive swimmer. She spent 21 hours on water every week. She's in the US in Boston, competing at a college level on the East Conference. This taboo about you can't wash your hair, it's like completely go, because you have to wash your hair 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. Get rid of the chlorine, get rid of the, because that's what you do. Yeah. So the question is, how do you do that, for a texture there in a way that gives you the benefit, that produces the solution that you want, and also is a clean formulation.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. So she was using quite a lot of the stuff we produced in the lab for many years until it wasn't workable anymore. You have to launch a product, for it to, to be able to benefit from it and other people to benefit from it. So that's just one gap.
Yeah.
Another gap we're looking at is when women are going through menopause, the hair fall, the hair thinning is not something that is, out of context. Is actually the estrogen level is driving inflammation in the scalp, and that is what is leading oxidative stress. That's why your hair is falling. What you need to do is also change your hair care routine, because what you use in your 20s isn't going to cut it when you're in your 40s, when you're going through menopause, because just like the skin ages, the scalp ages as well. Mm-hmm. So that simple explanation to say, okay, well, here's a product for people, for menopause women going there during that transition. This is what might be better for them, rather than them trying 20 different things, on the store that says, oh, try this. Oh, your hair is falling, try this. What is going on here? Try this. And all those products end up in the landfill because they've used one or twice. Mm-hmm. So that is what the things that we're trying to address, to say, how do we do better formulation? How do we do better product design? Yeah. And how do we communicate that, to the end user in the way that they will be able to find the right product in the crowd of, influencer marketing and, TikTok, marketing and stuff like that.
It's interesting that because I kind of knew some of that, and I knew that you were helping to create products that worked, but the waste reduction angle I hadn't kind of thought of, but it's obvious really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
If people are buying things that don't work, they're going to be thrown away, and you just creating huge amounts of waste.
Yeah, nobody ever thinks, what happens when I throw that bottle, put it in a bin? Oh, this doesn't work,
Yeah.
Or this been in there for, 2, 3, 4 years in the bathroom. Yes, I better throw this one away.
We've all got bathroom cabinets full of stuff.
And you never think, okay, what actually happened there? If it's, it's in somebody's landfill somewhere, and God help us if it's actually recycled in this country, it's probably ended up in other parts of the world that, we don't want it to be. Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting is that each of you are using science to get to the root cause of something, rather than just treating the symptoms or the effects. It's, no, why does this thing actually happen? Yeah. And really trying to understand that, and then creating a solution that really gets to the core of it, rather than just kind of tinkering around the edges.
Yes.
Should we have a little break? Because it's great to hear what each of you are doing, but it'd be good to have a bit of a chat about kind of your shared experiences and what it's like to actually start a life sciences business, particularly in this region, and kind of what that journey's been like. So we should have a little break and we'll come back.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Welcome back. I did offer the guests a Kit Kat, but for some reason, because biscuits on this podcast is something of a theme, so that's a first actually. But hey, we're talking about healthy living, so maybe that's appropriate. So I guess, so as well as being all involved in kind of life sciences and health products, you're based fairly locally. So I know, Nichola, you're in Dissington. You've got a fabulous kind of site where you are.
Yeah.
Rolling hills and...
Yeah. Well, when I had the choice of picking where I had my office, I was like, we're going to be in the middle of a field. I'm not going to be in a city. We're going to be in a field. So it's great. Free parking, cows, sheep, grass, picnics.
Good for the soul.
Good for longevity.
Yeah, exactly. Victoria, you're not based in the kind of Newcastle area, are you?
We're offices in Middlesbrough, right. And we're all remote because my co-founder is based out of Portsmouth University half the week, but lives in Nottingham, and so we kind of do everything digital. Right. But I do agree with Nichola. Like you need the. I live in Durham, and I love having the rolling hills around me and the ability to just have fresh air and some nature.
Whereas Sola, you're very, very much a Newcastle-based business, but in various parts of the city.
I kind of feel like I'm a nomad in Newcastle. Started my doctorate degree in Mascot, say 30 years ago. Then spent 3 years in that building. Then went into computer science, Claremont Tower, for 2 years. Then we we were part of a spin-out company that came out from Newcastle University, and we actually moved to Fenham, which was like the furthest away we've been from the city center.
The wilds of Fenham.
The wilds of Fenham. And then came back. When I started Hexis Lab, we started at the core, which is the first building on site 14 years ago.
Really?
Then moved to the Catalyst 3 months before the pandemic and the lockdown. Then the Biosphere when, in the middle of COVID. And then, still in the Biosphere.
Because so for those who aren't kind of local to this area, this Helix site, it was formerly the Scottish Newcastle Brewery site.
Yes.
And then became, I think it was called Science City, and now the Helix.
Helix site, yeah.
So, I mean, has that been useful for you in terms of the different facilities? Because I guess first you had was it a virtual office, then a real office?
Yes, so it was a virtual office, yeah.
And now you've got an actual lab space.
Yes, so I think COVID was the thing that tips off over the edge because the university needed their labs back, So like Nichola, we had extensive collaboration with different academics, PhD students, postdocs in different universities in terms of what we do. There's another aspect of what we do that is a lot more advanced, developing recombinant proteins and peptides, for therapeutics and for skin as well. So we can't do that in the lab here. We do that with the, collaboration through the university. So being in the city center, being able to collaborate and work with the universities, both in Northumbria and Newcastle, and also at Teesside, where we have, a huge collaboration going on. It's been fantastic to be around, the ecosystem. Yeah. And also we taking a lot of students on internship every single year. I mean, one of the ways I give back, to the, to the community, I think what I learned as a student is that being paired up or having a real life experience in a business or in a working environment gives you a different perspective, to your degree. And that's one of the things that a lot of students that come through, internship through Newcastle University or Teesside University says clearly is that is the best part of their degree. Because they come in and they face with a real problem, and also a work environment as well, like I'm not your dad, I'm not the university, that you've paid, to come and, make things look nice for you. This is a real environment. Yeah. This is how problems are solved. And you've got to have to learn something new. You've got to have to learn, the discipline of finding out new information. And a lot of them, come back. I mean, I had so many of them have gone into doing PhDs and all over the world. And they've come back really, really thankful, that they've got that experience, from us. Yeah.
So have you found that the Northeast is a perfectly good place to launch? Because people might think, oh, you need to be in London or you need to be in the Cambridge Triangle and all that. I mean, is it just as good here in terms of?
It depends on the business that you're setting up, really. I mean, for me, it's always been a good place to launch just because, you've got a lot of really passionate people, a lot of good support systems like RTC around. You've got the business growth teams. If you know where to go for the support, and like you say, the university collaborations, like we've just getting our first PhD student and industry collaboration who's starting later this year. We've just appointed them. So, the collaborations between the different organizations is really helpful. I think when you reach a point when you do need investment, there's also investment in the north, but I know there's a lot of strategic change nationally, and that will impact, especially life sciences, I would imagine, where, the emphasis is going to be on London. And so you have to be willing to travel. I was down in London on Wednesday and then I was in Coventry yesterday. That's also why I work remote, because you've got to be where the opportunities are for the growth and to meet people in person. Despite COVID and being able to do things remotely, you've got to be willing to travel and to build human connections, because that's, people by people.
And I know you spend quite a lot of time in London, but you'd never consider basing yourself there?
Absolutely not. Oh my goodness. I love going to London, but when I come back, I love to be back up here. And it's a funny one, that question. So like for me, I think from a science perspective, because I guess with us, we're kind of, I'd say we're half science, half business. We're an e-commerce business. From the scientific perspective, the Northeast is amazing. You know, we've got on our doorstep some of the best scientists in aging research, you know, in the world. So we've got this amazing opportunity for collaboration. So I'd say for that side, it's been amazing. For the business side, in terms of, we're a consumer brand, I'd say that's definitely been, for me, more challenging. Hence why I always spend a lot of time, unfortunately, in London. And I think as well, I do think it does have its challenges with investment. And, speaking from a personal perspective, as a woman going to London with a northern accent, trying to pitch, there's a certain, you are met with a certain degree of I wouldn't say it's,
I can relate.
Yeah.
There's a hurdle that wouldn't be there.
There's a definite, it's you have the conversations, where are you based? Are you based up in Newcastle? You've got a Geordie accent. Straight away, there's preconceived kind of barrier and wall. And I hate to say that, I am so proud of where I'm from. But it definitely does cause a little bit of a, I don't not look down upon. I wouldn't say that, but I do.
You've got to work a bit harder.
You have to work. You do have to work a bit harder. The minute you say you're from the north, you can almost feel that like, oh, okay, well, good on you for getting down here. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah. So it is funny, and then you do, and I do get met when I talk to people about what I've done, and then where I'm from. You get that like, oh, well, it's almost like they don't expect it from you, which can be a bit frustrating. So, yeah.
It is surprising as well, I would think, because you'd think, well, surely you know that there are things going on here that are just as good as anywhere else.
Do you know what? I don't think people do.
Right.
Yeah, I really don't think people do. And I don't think people know how good the Northeast is. And sometimes I quite like that. So my dad's a taxi driver, or was until he retired. And he always used to say he'd work at the central station, he'd pick people up that say, we didn't know how nice Newcastle was. He was like, yeah, because we don't want you coming up. We don't want to tell you because we don't want more people here. It's a secret. It's beautiful. And I do always laugh about that. But I'm like, no, it's actually, Newcastle in the Northeast has got a lot going on. And there's a lot of really bright ideas and companies that are coming out the Northeast. I think the bit that upsets me a little bit is that we can't keep a bit more of it up here, because we do feel like, okay, the opportunities are there and you have to go there. And yeah, it would be nice to try and retain a bit more of it here, which is why I've always been like, no, our company is based in Newcastle. We're keeping it based here as long as we could. We kept all of our warehousing and everything up here. So yeah, for me, it's something I'm quite passionate about. Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree. I can relate to a lot of things that you're saying there. Definitely, especially around preconceived ideas as a woman in science and technology, and especially, I suppose, some of the hurdles I've come across is because I'm not a clinician. People assume, oh, so you're a clinician, Victoria. What's your clinical practice? None. All right. And then it's like the topic, you can see the tone change, there's quite a lot of open-minded people, but it does happen, and then you'll say something really, of interest in a conversation, and it'll stop people in their tracks, and as if they didn't expect it. Or, yeah, I've been there many times.
So what's, for each of you, what's your kind of vision? So put yourself 10 years from now. Where would you want to be? What would you want to be doing?
Oh, wow. Okay. So for me, a big passion of mine is always like getting the science out to people. And I think 10 years ago, 10 years ago when I started Nuchido, I thought the way to get science to people was in products. It was turning the product, the science into something physical that somebody could use. And I do still think that is a big part of it and a very important part of what we do. But I also have learned more and more over the years that actually a big part of translating science is literal. It is the education. It's literally, there's a big gap between what scientists are doing and the average person. And I think, so a big passion for me is almost like that person in the middle as a bridge between everything that's going on scientifically and then how somebody that, like my mom or some friends that would never have ever been exposed to this be actually interested in it. Because also I think a lot of people are like, it's science, that's not for me, it's, you're a scientist. And then, a lot of people will just cut out and think, well, I can't talk to you. Let's stop the conversation. I'm not going to understand what you say. Like, let's change the subject. And it's like, for me, I think where I'm trying to move and what my passion is really that education and, trying to translate the science into something that people not can just benefit from, but actually to, be interested in it and go, do you know what, actually, I get that and I relate to it and I can actually see how that could be important in my life and, be a little bit excited about it and think, oh, I've learned something today and I'm going to go and tell my friends about that. And I think that's how you gradually get science out to people. It doesn't have to be big, major breakthroughs. It's those little bits where people are just learning something because at the end of the day, knowledge is power, Yeah, so just more talking science. I can talk science all day. That's where I want to be.
Victoria, what about you?
Big ambitions.
Because you're kind of an earlier stage, I guess, aren't you, in terms of...
So I suppose for us, we've got a big regulatory roadmap that we've got to kind of work through. We need to go and get some more science and research behind what we're doing. We know that our proprietary framework has been validated in research already, but we need to get, the AI element of that validated. So we've got a bit of a roadmap before we can go to market on that. But I'd like to think, in 10 years, definitely, I'd like to think hundreds of thousands of people will be using it and it'll be just as easy to use as your Google Health app or your Apple Health app. That's what I'd really like. I'd like it to have made an actual impact and difference to try and identify people earlier, or hopefully there'll be, treatments that'll come out that it can support.
Fab. And sure, because your journey is quite interesting, isn't it, in terms of the way it's flexed. So can you see what the next 10 years might be?
Yeah, so I mean, the way I see the next 10 years, we cannot do that without putting in context of the AI, because I think there's still a lot coming that we're not ready yet to respond to. So the vision for 10 years that I see for us is almost like a decentralized, autonomous robotic system doing formulation, producing ultra high personalized products for people to use, and essentially bringing manufacturing back to England because we don't need to do centralized manufacturing anymore. I think should be decentralized. And that is when the waste will begin to reduce.
Right.
So there's an element of, connecting the robotics, to the AI in terms of formulation, which we already have in terms of the AI platform, to see what that looks like. And also there is going to be a lot on education in terms of being able to explain to people clearly or create a pathway for people to find the right piece of information, rather than just through, social media or TikTok to say, okay, well, here's a path to finding the right solution that you need. And maybe, instead of, brewing beers, which such used to be, it could be a factory the size of this room that is solving the problems for the whole of this community. I think that is what the future looks like, but I could be wrong. But I think that is where we are going. Yeah. As a group, as a society, as the world, and not, shipping product from, Asia or any other parts of the world to come and, use, here.
So if we're still doing Northern Spotlights in 10 years' time, we'll invite you back on. And if we all start using your product now, we look exactly the same as we see that, won't we? Yeah. So nobody knows the difference.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, indeed, feel better. Yeah. Nichola, Victoria, Sola, thank you for joining us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, who knew there was so much amazing stuff going on in the Northeast? Well, I knew, but now you do too. So I hope you've enjoyed that episode of Northern Spotlights. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you'll find out about when the next one goes live. And we'll hopefully see you again on the next episode of Northern Spotlights.